And the thing about red flags is, like I said, you might not know that a red flag is a red flag. So if you come from a home, for instance, where there's lots of yelling and calling you names is part of everyday life, if you later on get into a relationship and you are called names and you're yelled at, even if you don't like it, it's going to feel normal. It's going to feel like home. Hi, I'm Paula and I am the founder of Accelerate Empowerment, where we are all about empowering the next generation of girls and also the parents that are raising them. So I'm sure you are all aware of the Sean Diddy Combs trial that's going on at the moment. And I really like to use things that are happening in real life, in pop culture, to sort of use as case studies, really, for everyday life. And a few weeks ago, when Cassie Ventura took the stand and gave her testimony about her time being in a relationship with him and everything that transpired, which I'm sure you know a lot about already. And there was a lot of discourse around the fact that she was 19 when they first met and how there was a power imbalance. And there were some people on either side of the spectrum who would say, oh, at 19, she was old enough to know better, to know sort of what she was getting into when things start to go wrong. And there were other people saying, well, no, 19's pretty young. And there was a power imbalance between them because she was trying to be a singer and he was a record executive. So there was obviously that power imbalance where she really wanted to please him. She wanted to impress him and make a career. And she thought that this was the way. And I think that sometimes when there is this discourse around whether someone is actually a victim, people throw out that thing of saying, oh, there were red flags and you missed the red flags and, you know, it was there and you ignored them maybe. And I'm of the mind that red flags aren't red to everybody. Yeah, so everyone has a different experience of life. You don't know where someone has come from. And by the way, I don't really know that much about Cassie, and this isn't really specifically about her or about Diddy either. It's more about using them as case studies, as examples. Okay, so it's that thing of we don't know what we don't know until we need to know it, right? Some people don't know a red flag is a red flag. And, you know, I have another channel, a podcast called Untriggered Parenting, if you want to check that out, where that's all about parenting and really bringing up our children intentionally, because we're raising human beings who are going to go on in the world and exist in the world and participate in the world, and how we can empower our children to really thrive in this world and navigate this world and all the obstacles that come with it. And the thing about red flags is, like I said, you might not know that a red flag is a red flag. So if you come from a home, for instance, where there's lots of yelling and calling you names is part of everyday life, if you later on get into a relationship and you are called names and you're yelled at, even if you don't like it, it's going to feel normal. It's going to feel like home. Yeah, and as much as we say, a lot of people say, oh, I'm never gonna do that when I'm older, I'm not gonna be like my parents, but that's what your body knows, that's what your brain knows. We like things that are familiar. Subconsciously, whether we know it or not, subconsciously we gravitate towards things that are familiar. So when people say, how did you miss the red flags? Well, it didn't look red to me. I want you to think about how you were when you were 19 or 18 or even 21. And we know that the brain isn't fully developed till 25. So that period when people think you're an adult from 18 to 25, you know, where there's like a different expectation of how you should behave or what you should know, there's such a disparity between what a lot of people do know and how much growing that there still need to be done. Your decision-making process isn't fully developed yet. That your emotional regulation not fully developed yet. So I think that in that sense, we can have a lot of compassion for the young people who are between that sort of age 18 to 24. And if you do stupid things, well, you're kind of still learning. But I feel like the grace runs out. You have a grace period up until about 18. And then people go, well, you should kind of know better. And my thing is, how can we equip our young girls from when they're really young? Because you might be thinking, oh, my daughter's 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, and she doesn't need to be exposed to all this. But that could be part of the problem. I think it's important to have conversations with our children in an age-appropriate manner, and start introducing certain things to them, so that they start to learn certain things, and as they mature, as they grow, they can really take these lessons with you. And while there are a lot of things that I could talk about today, and this video could be 3 hours long, about how to instill that confidence and in your child, in your daughter, and all the things that she needs to know to not end up in an abusive relationship. Things like modeling healthy relationships, because obviously if you as the parent are in an abusive relationship, the likelihood of that being repeated by your daughter is higher. That's just statistical fact. Building her self-love, her self-confidence, these are all things that we could talk about. But I really think it boils down to 3 things. And these three things you can introduce from as early as possible. So number 1 on the list is recognizing patterns. That's something you can introduce from a very young age, because as soon as your child starts school or even nursery, they're teaching them about patterns. They're showing them worksheets of there's blue, there's red, there's green, there's blue, there's red, there's green. What comes next? Blue, red, and green. So a child naturally will understand patterns, numerical patterns, 1, 2, 3, what comes next, 4, 5, 6, that kind of thing, A, B, C, D. So that's going to be familiar to them. So when they start growing up and maturing a little bit, and they get into that age where they start having issues with friends, friendships start breaking down, and they start being confused, then you can start having that conversation about patterns. If you have a friend and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they're nice to you, Thursday, Friday, they're not nice to you anymore. Come next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they're nice to you. Thursday, Friday, they're not nice to you. That's a pattern. And you can speak to a child and say, how does that pattern make you feel when, she's your friend for 3 days and then 2 days she's not talking to you, or the whole group ignores you, or what this pattern, are you happy with this pattern? Can you recognize that it's a pattern? And then once you recognize a pattern, what are we going to do about it? Maybe you can empower her to have a conversation with her friends and says, hey, I noticed that on these 3 days you're nice to me and then you're not. What's that about? Empowering her to notice the patterns and then do something about it, because I think that's a better concept to grasp as they grow up into their teens, late teens, early adulthood, as opposed to just spot the red flags. No, it's about what is the pattern, what's the general pattern of how this person acts towards me. Is there a period of where everything's okay, and then suddenly something happens, and then now I'm being treated poorly, and then it's a cycle that keeps happening. Sometimes it's hard when we're in the cycle to notice what's happening, but if we can really get them being to notice that from a young age about patterns, maybe they'll be able to pick that up a little bit quicker and easier when they are growing up and getting into relationships. And number 2 is getting them to trust their instincts and their discernment, and just being able to notice when something is off, even though they can't 100% explain why, but really trusting themselves and trusting their gut. Now, this one's quite tricky, because I often feel that as parents, we sometimes override our children's intuition and their gut feeling. We don't trust them to make the right decisions. So we can sometimes override that and veto them. The easiest example I can use is to do with food. When they don't want to eat something and we're like, no, you got to eat because you haven't eaten since whatever, and we don't trust that they know how hungry they feel, or when we force them to finish the food that's on their plate, and even if they're full, because we don't trust that they're full, because I know that's quite a nuanced conversation, because we know these kids will say they're full and then come back in 5 minutes and ask for like cake or something. I know that too, but it's little ways like that where we can sometimes just say, okay, I trust that you've had enough. I trust that you don't want to wear a jacket. I trust this, I trust that. That way, when we trust them, we're giving them validation to be able to trust themselves. And number 3 is really getting them to evaluate if their behavior is different when they are in the presence, if they're friends with or in a relationship with somebody else. Has their behavior changed? Are they suddenly not behaving in the way that they normally would? Are they suddenly doing things that's going against their values? And getting them to sort of recognize that. That's when you can tell that they're out of their element. They may be not in a situation that they should be in. If, for example, even in a friendship, you can ask your child as they navigate in friendships, no matter how old they are, when you're with so-and-so, are they encouraging you to do this? Is that something you would normally do if you were not with that person? And as they grow up into relationships, if they start acting more dysregulated, more paranoid, more angry, sitting down with them and saying, this isn't your normal behavior. Can you recognize that in yourself? Is this person, this situation, this relationship taking you out of your element of how you go through the world, is making you leave your values behind and do things that you wouldn't normally do? And that is the biggest sign, I think, that you are not in a place where you should be. And I think that if we can teach our daughters that from a very young age, they can start to look around at their surroundings, their friendships, their situations, and see, is this serving me? Am I operating in my element as my best self when I'm here, when I'm friends with that person, when I'm hanging out with that person? How am I showing up in the world in this situation? And getting your child, your daughter, to ask themselves these sort of questions when they're younger, asking them the questions, having that conversation together, really helping them navigate each stage of their life. These are the things that's going to serve them and maybe future-proof them from getting into abusive relationships. Now, we know that nothing is 100% certain, nothing is guaranteed, but I always say if you're intentional about things, then you're more likely to achieve whatever outcome it is that you want to achieve. And if you have made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for sticking with me. And if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like and a subscribe. I would appreciate it so much. And if you love content about empowering girls, empowering ourselves, please do give it a follow, and I will see you on the next video.